much. I'm thrilled to be back again for another month of uncovering great stories of entrepreneurship. So thank you, Comments on Champa and Women on the Rise. And for all of you coming out today, this is an amazing turnout. And I think we will all learn a lot, be inspired and by this wonderful panel. Just knock something over. Oh, I'll get it. You'll live. All right, I'll get it for you. Great panelists. They are the reason we're here. They are Larimer Square. Just a little look into what this wonderful block in this community is all about. I'm going to start from the bottom and introduce everybody and come this way, put you guys on the spot. By the way, today, this whole program is called Built on the Block, which I think is great. Don't you like that, Dana? Built on the Block. Very good. Two B's. First, on the other end, we have from just next door the owners, founders, creators behind Haley Grace, Haley Satterfield and Grace Buttroff. This week, you guys are celebrating your 5th anniversary, right? Tomorrow is your anniversary. That's so wonderful. I should mention that they both went to CU, and thank goodness they didn't. Haley thought then she would one day be an OBGYN, and Grace was going to law school. So happy for all of us who need fabulous clothing that they didn't. So welcome, and thanks you guys for coming today and happy anniversary. I'm sure this is a busy week for you. And what we'll do is we'll pass the microphones up and down when we get going. Then from Rioja, we have Beth Brodich, whose great-grandparents owned and ran a diner. Is that right? So the food thing was always in her, although you also thought, I was reading about you, that you were going to be a preschool teacher for a while? Yeah. For a couple years, but then, right? But then she really found her passion, or she already knew of her passion, but really explored on it. And then you worked over at the wonderful Panzano, and then you decided to open your own restaurant, Rioja, right here on Larimer Square. Let's go and talk about that move and starting your ownership and making it here, making it happen. Next, we have Wendy, who is with Comedy Works, Wendy Curtis. Wendy you didn't really see yourself as a GM, did you? You wanted to be an actress, right? You're an actress. But now she is the general manager, and has been for a while, of Comedy Works, which anchors which way? That way, the other end of Larimer Square, which is a huge, huge success, not only for people who live here, we love coming, visitors, and you get rave reviews of all the comedians that you have in your comedy club. So thank you for coming today. And they are joining the conversation with Dana Crawford, the creator, we can call you the creator of Larimer Square. Yes? Yes, we can. And then next to her is Jeff Hermanson, the CEO of Larimer Associates. Dana really, you're humble, but you started the idea, especially in Denver, of urban renewal. You're shaking your head, but you did. She's attracted to trouble. And most of the buildings, when you drive or walk around Lodo, have her stamp and her heart on them. She has produced and imagined and redeveloped so many other areas. Let's see, Acme Lofts, Oxford Hotel, Flour Mill Lofts, your namesake around the corner, right? Crawford Hotel, yeah, long story. And Jeff really was instrumental in creating what we love today as our Denver Union Station. It's just so beautiful. So you've worked with all these proprietors, restaurateurs, business owners. You've helped develop and imagine this space. So I think this is going to be a great conversation, because if there's any place in Denver that is true to the entrepreneurial spirit, I would say it's here, right? Right. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Dana. Okay, you need to hold that microphone to your face. And then as we just, you guys, is it on? I can't see without my glasses. I think I know how to work a microphone, but I really have no idea. Here we go. All right. So you guys, if there's anything you want to add, just be like, hey, throw me the microphone, I'll give it to you. You know, it's just meant to be conversation. I have a few things to bring up, but let's start with Dana. No, the only reason I have 42 pages, I have 28 font. So that's the only reason. So Dana, when you were envisioning in the 60s what this area could be like, a lot of people did not probably look at Lodo and Larimer as a place of thriving businesses returning. What gave you that idea, that encouragement, that yes, we can do this, I can do this? How did that all come about?
What an interesting question. I always say to people who ask me that question, let's go to the cruise room over at the Oxford Hotel and have a few drinks, because it's kind of a long story. But at any rate, you know, I guess the answer would be I got obsessed with an idea. The idea was generated by a year I'd spent in Boston in graduate school, and I fell madly in love with Boston, and then I moved to Denver. And then when I got into Lower Downtown, I realized that there was a lot of similarity between Lower Downtown and what I had just experienced as a lively part of Boston, Massachusetts. So people often want to ask me, what is my favorite project? And before you do, I would like to say that I have 4 sons, and they were born probably about, I don't know, very embarrassingly, about, you know, in about a 5-year span or a 6-year span. I try not to remember all of that. But at a certain point in time, we joined Planned Parenthood, and things got a lot better. I have certain lines that I use pretty frequently because they get laughs. And the whole 22 years that I worked on Larimer Square, every day was a crisis. And so I like to tell stories that make you all laugh and make me laugh too, because there were a lot of days when there really wasn't any laughter. But that doesn't encourage you to be an entrepreneur, and I want to encourage you. Because, you know, so many people go through life, and how many bankers are here? All right, how many lawyers are here? Not very many. How many insurance salesmen are here? A couple. But anyway, all those professions that I'm mentioning, I don't think involve passion. For being an entrepreneur involves passion. And it's so much more fun and so much more meaningful in a lifetime to be really doing something that you're driven by. And so, you know, as I said, it looks like a lot of you are here, and I don't know if we can all fit into the cruise room, but we would like to talk about that. And I'm just kind of a driven person, and and of course, if you had 4 children in that period of time, you'd have to figure out some way to get out of the house.
Jeff, as CEO of Larimer Associates, what would this area be like? Where would you be if she weren't around? If she wasn't driven and wanting to get out of the house?
To think that I have so much to be thankful for.
Can you speak up, please? It's hard to hear.
I'm sorry, I was giving credit to Planned Parenthood. But in all reality, whenever we look at the city and the insane success that we've had, and as we've moved from a cow town to really a primary city recognized globally, there's a litany of moments in time that really have contributed to that. But one of them for real was in 1965 when Dana saved this block. So not to beat a dead horse, but I think that we all owe something to Dana, so thank you.
And don't you think over the years, I mean, the kind of businesses that you attract, this block attracts, it's a special collection of entrepreneurs.
It is, and I think that the success of the block comes from staying current and constantly reinventing. And so the block is nothing without the entrepreneurial spirit. And you can see it with this collection of women here. I mean, it's staggering. But here lies the explanation for the success of Larimer Square. It's this incredible spirit visionaries, hard workers, and risk takers. And I applaud all of you.
Hey, Beth, what was it, what drew you here? You were over at Hotel Monaco Panzano, great, rave reviews, great place. What was it about this block and that drew you all here to open Rioja?
Well, we had looked around town, we had looked at Cherry Creek and, all sorts of different little neighborhoods, but this particular block was just so charming. And for me, it felt like home. As soon as we had met with Jeff and Joe to kind of talk about what this could look like, it was starting to become a reality for us. And the opportunity to own our own business and to be on a block that was so close to everything in the heart of the city, and truly the excitement of it just took off. And I can't think of a better place to start your business. If we would have gone to any of the other places, I don't think that we would have had the success. And the family atmosphere that's been created on this block too has been really special.
Haley, Grace, for you, starting your own business, how important was it, do you think, is your success tied to where you're located, to being on Larimer Square?
I mean, so directly. I think it has such a huge part of our success. It was the perfect spot. I mean, it was like what made our niche, just like so much more important, and I attribute so much to it. We originally actually didn't want to be on Larimer Square. We wanted to be in Cherry Creek, and our real estate agent was like, just come look. It was the holiday season. The lights were up. It was gorgeous. We just felt it immediately, and we took the spot right after that.
I think everybody does come down here. It seems like at Christmas time you always see the lights on everyone's pages, on their social media pages. This is an attraction. This is people that want to go here. And then if they don't come down here enough from the suburbs, they see the shops. They go to a comedy show. There's a lot in how many square feet. How many shops do you have side by side here on each block? I think, Wendy, your story is awesome because you started working at Comedy Works when you were in college. Is that right?
Right.
And
Yes.
I would imagine that business, there weren't, maybe I'm wrong, were there many women in management in comedy clubs when you were starting out?
No,
No.
no, it was a lot of men and with reputations of, being womanizers and doing a lot of cocaine and drinking a lot and staying up all night. That's what they had the reputation for.
And then there was you.
And then there was me. I'm here. Let's clean the ashtrays right now.
What's it been like? Comedy Works has been here for as long as I've lived in Denver.
37 years this September.
That's awesome.
Can you believe it? Well, my rise was just, it was my journey. I was in college. I got a job as a cocktail waitress. And a year later, I was managing that room. And a few months later, booking that room and this room. And then I moved around and eventually ended up here. They had other clubs. And I would go fix them when they were broken. And they were all broken. And then I would leave and go to the next broken club. But when I got to this one, of course this was the flagship. I would come from Fort Collins on Mondays, and I would come to our management meetings, and it was always so exciting. And I would go to all the shops. I would have dinner down here, blah, blah, blah. So for my entire career, 31 and a half years, with Comedy Works, Larimer Square has been, the Saturday night, the prom, it's always been very central to our existence, and it's very central to my existence now. It's the only property of all of my properties that I don't own, and I'm never leaving. We've got that on tape, right? It's so magical. Not only is Larimer Square magical, but my little comedy club down there is the most magical room in the country, and you ask any comic in the country, and they'll tell you. I'll give you their email addresses.
You all are so well established, even at 5 years. People know who you guys are. I'm sure there were challenges. What did you have to do to making it to CEO, to owning your own restaurant? to owning a fashion shop on like one of the best streets in Denver. What kind of mindset did that take for you guys? Were you always entrepreneur-like? Was there a learning curve?
I was always bossy, as
Okay.
one guy that I worked for, Comedy Works, called me. Well,
Bossy's not bad.
Bossy's not
There's
bad,
a-
and it wasn't appropriate either. It's called, somebody's gotta do this. And I never minded hard work. I never minded washing ashtrays. I never minded that. And I think that's what it takes. For me, it takes that tremendous drive that do anything. It doesn't matter. It's not about the end. Excuse me, it's not about what's in the middle. It is the end. That's what I think.
You know, being determined can be a detriment sometimes, kind of bulldoze people over. But, you know, Jen's my business partner, and she runs the kitchen end of things, and I run the front end of things. And, you know, we had this vision, and our first restaurant, Rioja, there was nothing that was going to stop us. And we couldn't tell people, like, when we described the dining room, we didn't know what it looked like. You know, we had no idea. This was so out of our zone. But we could tell people what we wanted it to feel like. And that passion that came out, it just took off. And, you know, getting those doors open was probably the most exhilarating, exhausting. I don't have children, but I can't even imagine having a baby because I feel like that's what it was like. And it takes that determination every single day. Like, I don't think entrepreneurs stop. You know, you just keep going there. The retirement isn't there. You just go on to a different project.
Yeah, I mean, I think Grace and I always hustled. We met each other freshman year in college, and for whatever reason, we were almost the only ones that constantly had jobs and, you know, working towards something. So I think that we both have entrepreneurial spirits, and
We shared a room. We were the only one of our roommates that had jobs on top of it. I think we're the only ones. We had a good hard work ethic.
we did always. So when Haley Grace was something that we started to talk about, it felt really natural, and it felt really natural doing it with Gracie. But we're both hustlers, and it's all day, every day. It's the first thing we talk about, think about when we wake up in the morning. It's the last thing I think about when we go to bed. So to have someone with that type of mindset, I think, is really crucial, and really lucky that my best friend and I both kind of share that same mindset, because it's definitely a particular characteristic you have to have.
I have to ask you, Dana, when you sit here and listen to 4 business owners from this block that you created, what's it like? What do you?
Well, it's really thrilling, but you know, and it's so true what they've said. It made me think of some of the moments around Larimer Square in years long gone by when we always had parades, and we closed the street, we'd do things. And one year, we had a parade, and one of the horses had, I don't know, sort of a diaper on or something. But the horse got off the beaten path and went over and dumped its diaper over in front of kind of the arcade. And of course, everybody in the audience was going like this. And then several of the men who were supposed to be working in Larimer Square were going like this. And so, you know who went over and cleaned it up. There are just a lot of stories like that, aren't there? And I don't, Jeff is here, and we really must say really nice things about him, because he, I think, as a leader in Larimer Square, has been more encouraging to entrepreneurial spirits than even my small group was. Although, as you go across the country and you look at projects something like ours, I generally find that there is some gal involved who doesn't necessarily have to be in the foreground, but she's been dumping the ashtrays, and I compare her to brown hens. The brown hens, the roosters are in the middle. And they've got feathers, and they kind of strut around, and it's a problem that has to be solved. And somehow it's not getting salt, and the little brown hens, all of us, run back and forth, and then we have the solution, and we slip a little note to one of the roosters, and it's all over. It's solved. It's just a wonderful deal.
Have you ever been called a rooster or compared to one?
Dana's actually called me a number of things, but
So Dana says you keep that entrepreneurial spirit, you look first. What kind of business, what kind of person, what kind of people, what kind of business people are you looking for to fill and keep this wonderful area so energized?
well, I think if the connection for Dana and I mean, we both have had the blog for approximately 25 years. And each, yes.
I was here first.
I really did have that part figured out. We're a number of things, from being described preservationists, but significantly we're placemakers. And so to your question, how do you succeed at placemaking? Well, it's sort of harnessing the energy. And I think by nature, someone was trying to rewrite my bio and describe me as a swashbuckling entrepreneur, but in reality, it's just sort of reckless. But the key to the success, my success, the success of the blog, is really harnessing other people's energy. And I think back to when Beth and Jen did Rioja. God, I mean, we wanted to get a chef-driven restaurant, and we started these conversations with the two of them, and we're just blessed to be able to put a deal together to collaborate and create the runway for them to have their success, which has been our success. And that story sort of follows Haley Grace. I inherited Wendy, and God forbid she would ever think of leaving. But with Wendy, with all of them, it's more than being a landlord, it's being a partner. Because we have no success without their success.
You all are, Dana included, everybody driven, passionate about what they do. But I'm sure you've had mentors along the way. Have you all ever received any advice that is so spot on, was so perfect? I know a lot of the women who come to these meetings love to hear the inside scoop, what's that one thing I should look for or follow? You look like you're thinking, is there something, or is there something that you would never advise?
Before I succumbed to Larimer Street, and you know, Larimer Street was Skid Row. So, and John Crawford, my husband, and I were involved here, and I remember one time, and he was also sort of in the oil business, but never found any oil. But I remember somebody asked him what he was doing, and John said, "Oh, I've been down on Larimer Street," and this guy just backed away from it. So it was definitely a pioneering effort. But I think that risk-taking is kind of something that a lot of people, I mean, obviously you have to weigh what's going to happen and what you think is going to happen. And Murphy's Law is always in charge. But I think you have to be willing to take a risk. And you have to have friends that will warn you not to do that, and your lawyer certainly will warn you not to do that. And it will predict all the worst things in the world. But I've found that if you just kind of keep talking about it and talk to other people about it, you begin to get new ideas. And as Jeff said, the trends are so important. I mean, you want to be the first here. You know, in this day and age, there's so many fabulous new ideas that all of us have to keep up with, which is another challenge of being in business for yourself.
I often talk about being an entrepreneur, and there's two aspects to me. I was influenced by a discussion, an interview with Sarah Blakely. Who knows who Sarah Blakely is? Well, she is the inventor of Spanx. And she talked about when she was growing up at the family dinner table on Sunday or whatever day it was, the father would go around the table and ask the kids what they failed at that week. And one would say, I tried out to be a cheerleader, it didn't make it. And the father would give the kid a high five, and so forth and so on. And what he was instilling was that it wasn't okay not to try, but it was definitely okay to fail. And I think that, that was a lesson that really came late in my life that I really appreciate. And the other part of it is reinvention. Now, for some of you in the room, you may have had some disappointments like I have had. And the key thing is that you face up to it and you're on to a new creation. And that's my recipe.
You guys want to talk about advice or anything that you'd offer or that you received or?
I think my dad told me when I was a kid. My dad was an entrepreneur, a small business owner, and if you wanted to hang out with my dad, you needed to be in the garage. And I like to say that by the age of 8, you had to know what a ratchet wrench was. But he instilled in me that don't be afraid of hard work, and you got to love what you do, because there are days that it's work. And I think he was really talking about passion, that you've got to find something that you really love, and then it's not so much like work, and it doesn't matter how many hours you put in, because there's a lot of them.
I was just going to say that. I remember when I told my parents I was getting in the restaurant business. You can imagine that went over really, really well, because that was in the late 80s, and restaurants weren't quite what they are today. There wasn't a Food Network, and there wasn't a lot of the publicity and the hoopla around the chefs. The maitre d' at the door was where it was at, and I was so proud. I was like, I finally figured out what I wanted to do, and I was going to school for it. I was going to go to Vegas and do my whole thing, and I came home and I was talking to my grandfather who had been in the business for years, and I was telling him about how I was doing in school and how I was doing everything, and he looks at me and goes, "Are you happy?" And it took me by a second because I was so work-driven. He asked me, he goes, "What are you doing in your personal life?" And that balance is really important. As driven as we all are, you have to take time to, again, love what you're doing, love the people around you, and really take that time to really enjoy it while you can.
I think everybody, both of our families, our friends told us it was a terrible idea. My dad's speech at our anniversary when we moved up, because we were originally at 600 square feet, and we begged Jeff for about 2 years after the first year to move up to our spot, which is, right below us almost. And he gave a speech, and his speech was, I remember, my only advice was, don't do it, And luckily, her and I were just so determined that, we had something good that, we're lucky and it worked.
So I think that our best advice that I think we kind of did with each other is go with your gut. Like, no one knows you, no one knows your brain like you do. And people thought we were nuts, and we kind of were. We were 23, we had nothing to lose, but we couldn't ignore our guts. Oh yeah, we did. But in our minds, we couldn't stop thinking, talking about it. And so go with your gut. If you think you have a niche idea, just go for it, because you're probably right. Don't let someone talk you out of it.
Good. So those are just some of my conversation points, but I always find at these gatherings, the best questions come from the audience. So, Jackie.
I'm going to run the mic. Who has questions?
Okay, good. First one.
My question is for new women entrepreneurs who are getting into their business. Is there any advice you would give for finding capital for those businesses? Because as women, at least I've seen it, and finding it has been extremely difficult. It's so hard for us to get funded and get our startups going, whether it's in the tech or not in tech. It's just been really difficult for finding a network of women or of investors in general who will work with women.
Colorado Lending Source is where I got Colorado Lending Source is where I got my last SBA loan, like $4 million, and the whole SBA program has always been very supportive, and they're very smart. And I don't like bankers as a rule, most especially lenders. Don't like them. I've got one. I'll give you that other name though too. And I don't think they're out of the box thinkers. They're very rigid, and they don't always see it, and that's the problem, I think, most of the time. But SBA programs, because I didn't come from money, so I had to borrow my money, and they've always been super helpful. SBA loans. Have you guys done SBA loans? It's a process, yeah. But and then Robert Gladu, Gladu, he's my lender, and he went from Vector to UMB, and now he's at Public Service Credit Union, and I'm refinancing $4 million, and they're the best. Just saying, Robert Gladu, Gladu. I'll give you his name. I tell everybody every time I speak, because he's an out-of-the-box thinker. He's not like the normal kind of lender. I've never met anybody like this guy. And he lends me money. Keeps doing it, so I'm just saying.
Any other questions? Right here.
Hi, my question is actually for Beth. Beth, I've been in absolute awe of you and Jen and how you've absolutely dominated the restaurant industry here in Denver. So my question is, what do you think was your biggest challenge on the rise in a very male-dominated industry?
Well, in general, the challenges that we have, whether they're male or female, is just growing our business. You know, really like taking those next steps to get involved with Bistro Vendome and Euclid Hall. And each time we had to grow, it was like, okay, we have to grow our team. And that was probably one of the biggest challenges, to be able to share your vision and instill that vision in those people that are working with you, but also to inspire new thoughts and new ideas as well. And that's the hardest part about it, because you don't know when to take that big step and maybe put a big investment in, or if you kind of hang tight, work a little extra right now and it'll all pay off. It's a really difficult decision, but thinking forward. And I think that in a male-dominated business, as it's been over the years, you know, it's tough, but you know, it comes down to the person, and it really, if you're going to be the boss and you're going to be in charge, you got to act like it all the time, and that means, you know, playing fair with the guys, playing fair with the women. All of that needs to happen in the restaurant.
So I've been reading a book called That's What She Said. It's a fantastic book, but you kind of touched on it a little bit, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. I'm definitely a feminist, but I'm also not a male basher. I think that we have to work together to actually make something effectively happen, and that book touches on that entire topic about how being so driven towards girl power and women's rights, all of these things, that it can create almost like a reverse bias, and then it makes us hard to work with as women. So I'm curious if you guys have experienced that. I know I've experienced some of that a little bit, that if I'm too outspoken on women's rights, that it can be taken the wrong way. So if you've experienced that, how do you bridge that gap so we can effectively work together and really fill the gap?
I think collaboration is really required in everything you do. Everything. And also a respect for salesmanship. because it seems like maybe over the last decade or so, that salespeople have been kind of denigrated. And so many times it's about selling an idea. And so, or going to the bank, you have to have a really gorgeous, detailed package. You have to think of every single question that they might ask you and then have it answered. You have to do a lot of pre-planning. And that takes collaboration to get advice from various experts so that you won't be caught short. I agree with what was just said about, it used to be that people would come in and I would interview people, and these gals, very attractive, very talented, brainy gals, and I'd say, well, what did you major in? And they'd say, women's studies. Well, 25, 30 years ago, boy, that was a very unpopular answer. And so I would have to kind of explain to them that maybe they might talk about sociology or some other field that was involved, but if they were, especially if they were interviewing for some job that they were really, really interested in, I suggested that they just try to address that in a different way. So it's all kind of part of salesmanship, but you had asked at one point, what about some good advice? I had a mentor before Larimer Square. I was a full-time volunteer at the Denver Art Museum, and I worked with a fantastic woman whose name was Seal Bach, and she was the wife of the director of the Art Museum, and she did all their public relations, all their special events, all their planning. And the thing that she taught me was that when you're doing anything, you have to plan backwards. And you have to make some decisions about your timeline. And like with a restaurant, another opening, another show, and maybe you're not going to make it because, of course, the construction guy got the air conditioning in backwards. But you are working toward that opening, and so then you know what you have to do as you look backwards. So that has always helped me a lot.
You guys, any other answers? No? All right, next question.
I think we hear a lot of questions about how to build a business, and I think what's most important that people forget is how to maintain a business. You've been open for 5 years. Rio has been open for what, almost 15 or over that, I think, 14. How do you maintain a business and stay successful?
I think like Jeff mentioned, reinvention and, trying to be the first and, I don't know, and trying to be the best. I had an advisor who had this really long mission statement, and I was like, way too many sentences, and I don't relate to that. So my mission statement is we're the best. We want to be the best comedy club in the country. That's it. And I think by most standards of comedians, I think we are. So mission accomplished.
Nice job. I think that, I have a saying, you're only as good as your last meal in our restaurants, and that's what everybody remembers. So you have one opportunity, and to maintain that takes constant dedication and constant growth and allowing the people around you to be successful. And that's really important as we've grown our businesses and stayed relevant in the community and relevant with the menus and decor and all of those things. But we have to allow people around us to grow with us, and I think that's really important.
Well, I think with fashion, it's also fun because fashion evolves so much. So you really, we can't just keep buying the same thing and doing the same thing. So maintaining it is almost, it's fun. We're constantly changing it. But I think you really got to see what's not working and change that immediately, and that's the most important thing. And, with fashion, it's a lot of fun in maintaining it and keep changing the evolution of it.
For us, it was a milestone in itself just to open our first store, and then we had our second store on the block. That was another milestone, and now that, we're 5 years, we've been successful, but to stay current and relevant and important to people is hard. And I mean, I think it's a lot of work. When we're in the store, that's a really small version of what we do. It's the hard work we put in when no one's looking, when you're by yourself and you're on a computer and you're exhausted and you're still working. It's that silent time where you don't think you can go anymore and you do. And yeah, just after hours and just constantly working hard because there's so many new boutiques coming up everywhere. And we have a lot of competition, but you try to just make that white noise and focus on why we started this 5 years ago and what the goal was in maintaining that women come in our store and walk out feeling the best version they can of themselves. So just constant work, I think.
We have time for one more question. Or we could thank our panel.
Last one. It seems like social media plays a very dominant role with a lot of company success. What have you guys done to maintain that? Especially Instagram is huge, especially for your company. I can imagine it's a very major thing, but it seems like everybody's on it and looks to social media.
I mean, Instagram is amazing. It is so helpful. And like the older we get, I mean, we're 20, 24, and we're 30, but our employees still seem to stay the same age, and they're amazing in teaching us. And Instagram is just like, it helps our sales so much. The more Instagram we do, the more stories, the more, I mean, it really shows in our sales. It's crazy, and no one wants to be on their phone that much, but it is so helpful. And I mean, the younger girls showing us everything to do is really incredible as well. How much it's constantly changing and how much we constantly need to learn and keep up with it. Like, we really have to keep up with it. It's crazy. Yeah.
Right, tenfold there. I think at first it was one of those, is this really going to catch on to Facebook and Instagram and, all that stuff. But, it's where everybody goes. So if you're not going to stay current, you're not going to engage it, you're left in the dust. And if you look at it as a really positive thing to not only just self-promote, but to talk about the really cool things that are going on in the restaurant world, I think that that's really cool. You guys should all know about, Good Food 100. There's so many cool things that can come out of social media that are educational, not just, hey, look at this cool new special we're running tonight, but all things that hopefully look to as more than just a place to eat, but maybe some educators, inspirations for those people that are out there and interested in food and beverage.
I think it's, for us, it's replaced advertising. I mean, we used to have an advertising budget that was print and cable television and radio, and our social media, not entirely, but a good portion of it is, of our advertising is now social media. And of course, Facebook ads and things like that, but it's crucial. And I'm really ancient, and it's always scaring me.
I'm even more ancient. And I may be the only person in this room that doesn't have a Facebook account. But actually, I wanted to comment on the previous question about staying current. And my claim to fame actually is that I've closed more restaurants in this town than anyone else. I think I've shuttered 7 of my own restaurants. And the reason was that I had incredible success. Oh, this is back to the previous question. I had great success, and all of a sudden the world changed. And my success attracted a lot of other restaurateurs to come to Denver, and they just cleaned our clock. And I actually lost my restaurant business, but I came back reinvented. But to Beth's point, God, the onslaught of new restaurants in Denver is staggering, and the urgency for restaurateurs like Beth and Jen to stay current, it's all about success, and I applaud you for being able to do that. And if you don't do it, you become a dinosaur. and you're just on the side of the road.
And at my age, I'm definitely risking the dinosaur. I'm, a lot in the hotel business now with the Oxford Hotel and then the hotel at the Union Station. And now in that business, TripAdvisor has completely changed the picture, because if you can stay in the top 5 or 10 with TripAdvisor, that's it. You don't have to really do a lot of advertising. When we started Lambert Square, I used to love to talk to people who talked about their advertising budget, because we didn't have a penny to put into advertising. But boy, did we work that public relations and telling the stories. And we didn't have a grand opening. Every time we opened a restaurant or a shop or something, we had a big fundraiser for some good charity. And we got a lot of coverage. And it made everybody happy, but we didn't have to have an advertising budget.
It's all about those stories, isn't it?
It is. It is. Thank you all. Jackie?
So we want to thank our panel and to Kyle for a very memorable conversation today. Thank you so much.